Alright, I finally got it, so it's just about exactly balanced at 6 grains. That's set to 6.0. And it's hovering just about perfectly balanced. We're going to do one final test here to make sure that it's really throwing a consistent charge. The final test is going to be to throw 10 charges and weigh it and multiply 6.0 by 10. And it should equal roughly 60 grains. My math is still right. So there's 1, 2, 10. Alright, let's weigh it. 6 grains times 10 throws should be 60 grains. So I'll set this to 0. This is still set at 0. I'll run that out to 60. We'll see how close we are. It's probably not going to be dead on accurate, but it shouldn't be too far off. Looks like it's not heavy enough. That means it's not throwing quite enough powder. Let's see how far off we are. 50, 55, 59. It's throwing about 59, so it's throwing a little tiny bit under 6 grains, 5.95 something. But for me, because it's my initial load here, and I'm not pushing the envelope, I'm going to call it close enough to 6. Alright, this is the part of the game where you want to put your safety glasses on, because we're going to start loading up some primers into the flip tray. Primers come in a box, and then individually they come in a small package that looks like this. The object is to get these primers into this tube using this pickup tube. Easiest way to do it is to use what's called a flip tray. I'll show you how those work. So the way a primer flip tray works is this. You have a box of primers. And if you're lucky, and again I'm actually not using a small pistol, I'll be using a large pistol for this load. If you're lucky, the primers all come out right side up like this. If you open up the flip tray, you'll notice one has a ridgy side, the other has sort of a smooth side. You dump them, you put the ridgy side on top of the tray, flip it over, here's all your primers upside down. If they're not all upside down, or if they're some right side up, you can sort of give this a little shake around. These ridges will all turn them upside down eventually. Then you take the top half, cover it up, flip it over, and there are all your primers ready to be picked up with the primer pickup tube. And you take your primer pickup tube, which make sure is nice and clear and empty and the right size. This is a large one for large primer pistols. You start picking them up one at a time, just pressing it gently onto the primers. And eventually you pick them all up and the primer tube is filled. You don't want to put too much force into these things because primers are explosive. And if you hammer at them, they could blow up. So be gentle. Alright, the primer pickup tube is now completely filled with primers. You can hear them in there. We're going to put them in the priming tube. Take the weight out. This thing has a little cotter pin in here that when you pull out, all the primers that are stacked up in here will just drop down to the tube. I pull and listen. There they go. All the primers are in there. I give it a couple light little taps, make sure they're all in. Then I check it and make sure I can see all the way through to make sure there are no primers in here at all. If any primers get stuck, by the way, the last thing you ever want to do in either the pickup tube or in this thing is to start ramming them out, because they are designed to explode on impact. And if one explodes, the rest are going to explode. The best thing to do if any primers get stuck in a pickup tube or in the primer tube is to soak the whole thing down in WD-40 and mail it to Dillon, and they'll just give you a new one right off the bat. Now we can put the flap of the low primer alarm on and drop our weight in gently on top of the primers. So we know that our powder charge is throwing the correct amount. Our primer tube is filled with primers. We've got some cases here, got a box full of bullets. We're ready to go. What we're going to do is we're going to do one cartridge first all the way around to make sure everything goes well before we start getting progressive with it. Alright, now that all our testing is done, we're going to put our pins in. 1, 2, 3. Keep these cases in place. First thing we're going to do is we're going to put one shell right in there. Crank the handle. You can hear the old primer pop out. Bring the handle back down here. Now the old primer has been popped out with this pin here. The new primer is sitting right there, and when the handle's at rest right now, meaning that a shell is going to slide easily in and out of here. When I push this handle forward, like that, the shell plate assembly drops and the primer gets pushed up. It's going to get pushed right into the primer pocket here. Like that. You'll feel a little bit of resistance as it pushes it in there. Next, we're going to manually index the case over the second station. Cycle the handle again. That's going to fill the case with powder and bell the mouth out just a little bit, exactly to where we set it. Then I'm going to manually index it again. Stick a bullet in here. Now before I actually put the bullet in, I'm going to stick my head over here and I'm going to look into that case to make sure it's filled up with the appropriate amount of powder. Basically what you don't want to do here is double charge it and fill the case up all the way. So after having checked that, place the bullet in there, cycle it again. That puts the bullet to the right depth. Manually index it again, cycle it, manually index it again, and check out our cartridge. It looks pretty good. Now I'm going to test this first case off the line by using a case gauge. Take the cartridge, pop it right in. Give it a little feel. If it doesn't come out the top, it's the right length. If it fits in, the case is in good shape. I also like to give it a quick twist to make sure that there's no cracking or the case isn't obviously deformed. You put it in there, you can give it a rub too to make sure that the primer is at least flush and preferably a little bit indented into the case and make sure it's not sticking out. This cartridge looks like it's all set. Time to do a bunch. Alright, we're going to see how well you can see this. But it's time to get progressive on this thing. Put in one case. Cycle it. Push in the primer. Manually index. Case. Cycle it. Push in the primer. Manually index it. Here's where you start using two hands. Case. Observe. Bullet. Cycle. Push in the primer. Index. Case. Look. Bullet. Crank it. Push in the primer. Index. Case. Look. Bullet. Crank it. Push it. Index. Case. Look. Bullet. After a few revolutions, I like to pull the case out and recheck it with a scale to make sure it's still throwing the right amount of powder. So I'm going to re-verify that this is set to 6 grains. I'm going to pour in my charge. A little bit light, 5.9 and a half, but other than that, looking good.